Good morning. We are going to be reading Chapter 6 today of The Keeping Room by Anna Myers. Dear Father, are you really in Camden Jail? We can see that building from our upstairs balcony. How can you be so nearby and seem so far away? I wake to the thud of a board striking board. I turn my head toward the window, but someone has pulled the curtains. Don't open them, says my mother from across the room where she sits writing at the desk. I sit up and I realize what causes the thud. The trapdoor of the gallows strikes the back of the structure when the latch is sprung. The hanging has begun. The other children are still sleeping. Mother does not speak. She keeps her head down, her mouth pulled straight and tight. The quill pen is gripped tightly in her hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, I count. There is little space between the thuds. The soldiers I know must be lined upon the great structure, waiting their turn to die. How did the English decide who would die? Did they, I wondered, have some sort of trial, or were their death sentences handed out offhandedly to reduce the great number of prisoners the British had to care for? My stomach begins to turn and then to jump. Jumping up, I run to the chamber pot. On my knees, I am wretched and vomiting. After I've washed out at the bowl and pitcher, I go to my mother, who's put away her quill and folded her piece of stationery. She looks up at me and forces a smile. We must endure, Joey, she says. We will fall sick to our stomachs many times, even sick to our souls, but we must endure. Later, I learned that what my mother has written is a letter to my father. I wonder what she has said. Has she begged him to fight for the British, to at least pretend allegiance to the crown? I'm going to see Cornwallis, Mother announces. She goes behind the dressing screen and changes into a bright green frock. Then she brushes her fair hair and piles it on top of her head. What will you say to him? Mary asks as she watches Mother put on a green hat. Mother draws in a deep breath. I shall say, General Cornwallis, you've come into my home and banished my family to one small room. Your men eat my food and leave marks upon my floor. I am here to ask politely, to beg if you wish it. I beg that you allow me to visit my husband in Camden Jail. It's a lovely speech, but Mother is never allowed to give it to General Cornwallis. She is told he will see her, but we will wait for 2 hours outside the door to what was once our dining room. Soldiers come and go. Once the general himself comes out to leave the house, but he is surrounded by other officers. Lord Cornwallis, my mother calls out, but he does not even turn his powdered wig to glance in our direction. My mother wants to remain until Cornwallis's return, but we are ordered back to our quarters. Finally, when he brings our noon meal of bread and cheese, Captain Harkins also brings us word. The general says there is no time to give you an audience, nor will he allow you to go to the jail, which is no place fit for a lady. My mother pulls in her breath as if someone has struck her, but the captain goes on. He will, however, allow the boy to go. He leans his head in my direction. Alone? I blurt out before I think, and immediately my face burns with shame. I will go with you. Mary jumps from her seat on my bed and comes to stand beside me near the door. The general will not allow a grown woman to go. I say more gruffly than I should. He would never allow a little girl to accompany me. Mary turns to Mother. Let me dress like a boy in some of Joey's clothes. I'm almost as tall as he is. Mother does not even consider the request, and I am ashamed that I wish she would. Mary is plucky. Having her beside me would give me heart. I am too unsettled even to taste the cheese or bread. While the others eat, I move about the room, trying not to pace the same spot. Mother has folded the letter to Father, and she presses it into my hand when it's time for me to go. Wait until he has read it, if they will allow you to tarry so long, she says. He may want to give a word or two as reply. Our porch is now full of redcoats. They see me as I make my way out the door, but they do not step aside to let me pass. I pull myself up straight. Excuse me here, I say, but my words come out much fainter than I intended. A soldier elbows me, and I fall sideways into another redcoat. There now, little Yankee boy, watch your step. He shoves me into yet another man who is dark with mean eyes. I say, the thin soldier shouts, what have we here? A bit of a ball to play with. He shoves me back in the direction from which I came. A third man grabs me now. There is a vile smell of strong drink on his breath, which he blows into my face as he speaks. A letter, have you? Let's have a look-see. He reaches for the papers. I scream, and with a mighty swing, I kick at him. My foot finds its mark, and there is now a streak of dirt on the white leg of his uniform. You little rebel devil, he shouts, and he spreads the palm of his big hand, ready to slap my face. I am unaware that Captain Harkins has stepped out onto the porch until he bellows, "Desist!" The man who holds me loosens his grip at once. I stumble and almost fall among the men who are suddenly quiet. "Attention!" shouts the captain, and they stand straight and salute. The captain takes my arm and pulls me away from the others, at whom he glares. "Your behavior is disgraceful. Does the king's army have nothing more to do than torment children? You are now warned. Should I see or hear again of any such behavior, I will see that the offender or offenders," he pauses and looks about at each face, "I personally will see that you are thrown into Camden jail and left to the mercy of the rebel soldiers there." The men are quiet. Without looking up, I say, "Thank you, Captain Harkins," and I hurry down the steps. Another redcoat passes me on the first step. I do not look up at his face, but when he speaks to the captain, I recognize his voice. "You won't always be about to rescue them," says Keegan. I turn back and I see his beastly grin. On the bottom step, I stop and stare. A mound of newly dug earth is spread across the grass where a big ditch has been dug in front of our house. It's covered over now, but I know it serves as a grave for the men hanged this morning. Don't think, I tell myself, don't think at all. Just walk by the ditch with your eyes on the poplar tree. There is a robin in the poplar tree, and he sings, and she sings as she builds her nest. So fastened on the bird and her song am I that at first I do not hear Captain Harkins calling, "Young Joseph!" I stop, but I do not turn back, which would mean seeing the ditch again. He comes to stand beside me. "You have an order of passage from General Cornwallis." He points to the paper I hold with Mother's letter. "Use it." He looks back toward the men on the porch. "Soldiers will soon enough part when they see the seal." For just a moment, gratitude makes me feel warm toward the captain, but then I remember the uniform he wears. The warm feelings turn to ice. "Thank you," I say, and I walk away from him. "Wait," he calls. "I may as well go with you a ways. Give my legs a bit of a stretch." I think I should not be happy of any Brit's company, but I am. I do not say so, however, and we walk in silence. The Camden I knew is gone, turned into a different town. I am amazed at how quickly the British soldiers have made it their own. Though the day is fair as only a June day may be, no children chase hoops through the streets. Women in gingham dresses do not pause before the shops with their baskets to exchange a bit of gossip with one another. Men do not stand about the doorways of the blacksmith shop or the tavern. Instead, there are redcoats everywhere. Those citizens who do stir move quickly, eyes down. Even the dogs seem unnerved, slinking near their homes, tails between their legs. Euban is standing in front of the Quaker meeting hall. I run to him. "They hang men." My words are soft, but inside I am screaming. "They dig big ditches in a front yard. Just toss in the bodies and cover them up." For a moment, Euban closes his eyes. He presses his fingertips against the side of his face. Finally, he speaks. "War is never kind, Joey," he says, and he reaches out to touch my shoulder before he leans against the wall of the church. "They're murderers." I clench both my fists. "I wish I could hang every one of them." Then Captain Harkins is beside me. "You've found a friend then, young Joseph." "Yes," I mutter without looking at him. "Euban is my teacher." Euban steps forward and introduces himself. Captain Harkins says his name, and Euban puts out his hand, as if the captain has come to our village on holiday, a pleasant visitor. I am horrified to see an American so welcoming. Euban is a Quaker, I explain. He does not believe in war. "Perhaps we should all become Quakers," Captain Harkins says, and his smile seems sad. "I wish to seek permission to come to Kershaw House to go on with Joey's lessons. I've been paid in advance." I am disgusted with Euban for being so friendly to the enemy. I keep my eyes down so that he will not see how much I want to go on with lessons. Having him come to the house each day would be a comfort and a distraction, and I am hopeful. Captain Harkin is all soldier again. "It is Cornwallis' house now," he says. "I will need to check orders, but come tomorrow. It is probable the way will have been cleared by then." Euban nods, then smiles at me and gives my shoulder a friendly slap. Captain Harkin and I move on, but I look back at Yuvin. I am very glad he will be each day in our house. As I watch, Hannah Goodnight comes from the meeting house door. Her golden hair shines in the sun. Yuvin steps toward her, and they stand smiling into each other's eyes. For a moment, the thought that war does not change everything warms me. But the warmth cannot last. The jail looms before me. I am afraid of seeing my father as a prisoner, afraid to face him because I failed to save my mother and the little ones from the British. As at the low wooden steps, Captain Harkin stops and tells me to show my pass to the guards at the entrance. I will wait here for you, he says, and he takes a pipe from his haversack. My knees are shaking, but I step up to the big door and to the guards. They look only at the seal. Tell them inside what business you have, the taller one says. I pull open the heavy door and I am horrified. This small jail was never meant to be a military prison. It is full of men, most of them in shackles. They sit upon the floor everywhere. They sit upon the floor everywhere. A few are stretched out, eyes closed. I wonder if they are asleep or dead. The talking and the moaning mix and become one mournful lament. There is a smell of sickness and of human waste. The guards who surround the men look as miserable as do their prisoners. How did you get in here? The guards demand. He points at my chest with the sharpest, shiniest bayonet I have ever seen. My skin stings as I imagine how that blade could slice. A pass from General Cornwallis, I say. I hold it out and try to keep my hand steady. I've come to see my father. I do not step back, but I am glad when he finally lowers his bayonet. And who might that be? Joseph Kershaw. He points toward a corner staircase. Up there. I make my way through the broken men. Most of them ignore me, but one reaches out to touch my leg. He is older than most of the others, probably as old as my father. His face is flushed, and I believe he is ill. Please, lad, he mumbles, could you get me word of my... I can hear no more. His voice is too weak to compete with the sounds all about us. I hunch down closer to his face, but the guard is coming toward us. You boy, he shouts. No talking to the prisoners. Go on to your business. The soldier does not turn loose of my leg at once, but I pull away and move on. I turn to look back. He is bent, head on his knees, and the guard is coming toward him with a wooden club in his hand. Quickly, I look away, facing the stairs again. If the guard strikes the man, and I cannot bear to see. Moving toward the stairs, I keep my gaze down, determined not to look into the eyes of another prisoner. My own misery is enough. I have no strength for viewing another's. 12 big steps make up the stairs to the second floor. Counting them helps to calm my pounding heart. Unlike the crowded lower floor, there are cells here, but many men are crowded into each one. I stretch my neck trying to search out my father. A guard comes to me at once. I do not see his face at all because I study the buttons on his uniform. Yet somehow I am aware of his scowl and that his expression is full of disgust. I hold out the piece of paper at which he only glances. Miserable yokels, he mutters. Why did they let them in here? He does not seem to be talking to me, but he knows I can hear his insult. My hand tightens into a fist, but I know that I have just used that hand to hold my entry permission. I push back my thoughts about how this jail belonged to the people of Camden long before redcoats such as this ill-tempered soldier came along. I do not wish to make him dislike me so much that he might throw me out despite my pass. The guard begins to move, and I follow him through a hallway that leads to another group of cells. Without a word, he points toward the middle cage made of iron bars. There is my father. His head is down, and he does not see me, but his face is in full view. I gasp and am unconcerned by the snort of disapproval made by the guard. Father has turned old, older perhaps than the soldier who tried to talk to me. Is it possible that this hair has always had so much gray? Could his face have been so lined before? I shake my head. No, this defeat has aged Joseph Kershaw the elder. I do not want to walk up to him. He sits in chains with his head bowed. My father has never bowed his head to anyone but God. I will not tell my mother how he looks. I will lie and say he seems strong. The guard prods me with the butt of his musket. Want to see him or not? He says before he stumps off. I step closer. Father, I say, but I know my voice is too soft. Father, I say again, and this time he hears me. He gets up from the bench and comes toward the front bars. Watching him hobble with the chains is almost too much for me. Young Joseph, he calls. My son is here. The other prisoners sit up and take notice, but soon I am aware of only my father. His face has lost most of the weariness now. It is you who makes the difference, I tell myself. You are your father's son, and you bring hope to him. His chained hands grip the bars, and I reach out to touch one of them briefly. I would like to lay my face against his fingers to feel his touch, but I do not. Such an act would be acceptable for Mary or George, but not for me, for I am a man now. You are safe, he says, your mother, the other children. We are all well, I swallow. The redcoats have taken over our house, put us in a room upstairs. The town did not even try to fight them. He nods. There was no way. If a small regiment had come. He stops and shakes his head slowly, but the devils are everywhere, behind every tree, sitting on every step. His voice drops. There was never any hope of defeating them. Defeat is not a word I've ever associated with my father, but as he reads my mind, he pulls his body straighter. The war is not over yet, son, he says. For a second, I feel better, glad to see him unconquered. But then he adds, we'll win. We'll get rid of those redcoats, and you can help. I can help? I stare at him with disbelief. Had he not just commented on the vastness of their numbers? You watch. He grips the bars hard, and his eyes drill into me. You watch for a chance to strike against the murdering, thieving lobsterbacks. Be vigilant, and your chance will come. I nod my head, and I say, I will, Father. I promise I will watch. He smiles. I feel good. There beside my father, I am confident that I will not fail his charge. Then my father's expression changes. Son, he says gently, I think they have let you come today because it is my last day in this prison. No! The scream comes out without my willing it to, and I wipe my hand across my eyes, trying to erase the picture of the gallows that flashes before them. Easy, boy. I'm to be put on a ship, sent to an island prison, Bermuda, perhaps. My knees are weak with relief. I thought, Father, they've built a gallows in our side garden, and this morning they hanged men, many of them. In my garden, they hang Carolina's defenders on my very property. Among the honeysuckle, I add as if the details were an important one. My father's face now has no trace of old age or defeat. It is red, burning with hate. By God, we shall show them. Are you sure they won't kill you? He is still angry and shakes his head vigorously. They know I've still some important friends in England. They'll save me for trading. When the war is over, they'll want me to exchange for other officers and such. Suddenly I remember. Mother sent this, I say, and I yank the letter from my pocket to hold out to him. Your mother, he says, and he looks surprised as if she maybe had slipped his mind. Oh, give me the letter. He is still reading when I hear drums. A small group of 6 or so men come marching into the room. They're here, my father says, and begins to speak rapidly. Cornwallis wanted me to join the damnable British, although I actually thought I might. He squeezes my hands. See to your mother and the others. Tell them not to worry. I shall likely be allowed to write to you all. I hate the tear that forces its way from my eye and down my cheek. My father, I hope, has not noticed. He straightens his worn uniform and tightens back the binding which has let his hair fall loose about his face. He does this, I know, for the soldiers who serve beneath him. He has no wish to appear as a beggar when the British march him out. Be brave, my son, and be vigilant for your chance to strike, he says, and he smiles at me. They are beside me now. Step aside, bellows an officer, and I catch the flash of his bayonet in the sunlight from a high window. A young soldier produces a key. The door is opened, and my father and his cellmates are yanked out. Wait, I scream, and try to slip around a large soldier to reach my father. The soldier does not look at me, but his red sleeve elbow jams hard into my ribs. I fall back against the cell bars, but I get a glimpse of my father's face. Stand tall, young Joseph Kershaw, he calls. Then they are marching him away. My father looks back, but an extended bayonet forces him to turn again. All around the jail, our soldiers are shouting messages. Cheers for Colonel Kershaw. God be with you, sir. Carolina salutes you. Still leaning against the bars, I slide down and let myself settle in a miserable heap upon the floor. My father is out of sight now, and no pass will allow me to see him. They are taking him across the ocean, and I wonder if he ever will return. From a corner of the jail, one lone voice starts to sing. Come join hand in hand, brave Americans all, and rouse your bold hearts at fair liberty's call. No tyrannous acts shall suppress your just claim or stain with dishonor America's name. Other singers join. Looking about, I see several soldiers who, like me, have raised their bent heads. Many of them are singing now. Most of these men are bound hand and foot. They are in danger of being hanged, yet they sing. I have the strength now to rise, and I am about to do so when I stop, suddenly aware that a red leg is beside me. Looking up, I see the young soldier. He goes into the cell once occupied by my father. It occurs to me now to wonder what will become of the two men who were crowded in with my father. Will they too be shipped off to prison, or are they even now waiting in our side yard to be hanged? The young soldier has picked up my father's knapsack. I know that the bag contains things my father will need, one of them being a box with a lock of my mother's hair tied with a blue ribbon. Will you take this bag to him? I ask. The soldier nods his head, and I see that his expression is kind. That I will, he says. My own father is in an American prison. Would that some soldier there be kind to him. He dashes away, leaving me staring after him. For a moment, I think about Euban's remark that not all redcoats are monsters, but I do not let the thought fully form. There is far too much for me to do. I cannot let myself be distracted by thinking of kind redcoats. I am up then and making my way to the door. Men wave to me with shackled hands and call encouraging words. Near the door sits a boy who is certainly about my own age. His hair is red and his face is freckled. On his cheek is a great bloody slash. He glances up at me and I lean down at him. Are you a soldier? I ask. Reckon I am now. His voice is full of fire. Beside him is a youth who is somewhat older, but who bears such a strong resemblance to the first that I am sure they are brothers. It is the older one who speaks next. He was but walking beside me along the road after the battle. The lousy lobster back slapped him in chains and threw him in here with a lot of us. Him, just an innocent boy. Old enough to face a redcoat saber, the boy says, and I see he is proud of the injury. His brother is proud too. Refused to black the nasty Colonel's British boots, he smiles, but then turns serious. Wound needs dressing, though. He uses his head to point to a shelf beside the door. There's bandages and cleaning solution right there, but not one guard will lift a finger to help. A snort comes from the injured boy. I don't have a redcoat bandaging any spot on me. Likely their very hands are poison. I'll do it. I start to move away, but the boy grabs at my trousers. Do they come and cite you they're liable to do as bad as to you as they did to me? I look directly into his steady eyes. Let them do it then, I say. We're all likely to bear a hateful mark of the British in one way or another. It seems certain that the guards see me take the materials from the shelf and carry it back to begin the dressing, but no one moves to stop me. They're about half asleep, I comment on the guards as I work. The boy's left hand, cut to the bone, is even worse than the injury on the cheek, which is what I first noticed. I put it up to ward off the blow, he says, as I clean the gash. I am not experienced as a nurse. The raw, gaping flesh makes my stomach roll, but I do not give up until a rough bandage covers both spots. The brothers tell me they are from Waxhaw Way and that their surname is Jackson. They talk too about why they fight. We're a new country, says the older one. Don't want to bow down to kings on account of who his father was. Don't want to bow down to any man. The younger one makes a fist with his uninjured hand. Guess you've proved that, I say. The older one nods his head. You mark the name Andy Jackson. There's a flame in my brother, there is, and I'll tell you, the world is bound to see it. Andy laughs. The British will see it for sure if ever I get out of here. I fell me more than one of his Majesty's henchmen. Both brothers thank me. I return the supplies to the shelf, but I am drawn back to the Jacksons. Perhaps I'll see you again, I say. Both brothers thank me. I return the supplies. I go downstairs with a burning inside me and a flame built upon the promise to my father and lit from the fire of Andrew Jackson. I will watch as my father has told me for every chance to strike against the cruel enemy. Perhaps I, like Andy Jackson, will bring down a redcoat. Moving again through the huddled prisoners, I feel much stronger. I meet their eyes and I wave my hand or nod my head. Some of them smile at me and I feel they know somehow that I, too, am at war with the British. When I see the soldier who wanted to speak to me, I know that I will try again. I make my way through the others toward him. A guard from the corner post shouts at me, but I flash the seal. Permission from Lord Cornwallis, I call. He yawns and makes no effort to move toward me. The soldier sits hunched, knees raised to support his head and arms. He does not see me. I touch the torn sleeve of his dirty shirt. Hello, I say softly, but he does not lift his head. I glance at the spot where the guard stands, but he seems to pay me no mind. Still another more diligent than this tired round man may come at any moment. There is not a moment to waste. This time I put my hand on his shoulder. Through the rough material of his shirt I can feel heat, too much even to be caused by being crowded in the hot jail. Fever, I say, and I give him a gentle shake. There's a small moan as he raises his head and looks at me with weak, watery eyes. I'm terrible sick, boy. Someone should help you. I glance around at the other men, also in shackles. He raises his hand to give a feeble motion of dismissal. It's my boy I'm fretted over. We was in the battle together, but I ain't seen him since. Rob's his name, Rob Wilson. I've passed the word all about. He ain't here. What's become of him? That's what I've got to know. I stare at the frail soldier whose life is likely slipping away, but whose only concern is for his son. I'll find out for you, I promise. You're a good lad, he whispers, and he drops his head back into his arms. Just as I feared, another guard has joined the round one and has been informed of my path. Boy, shouts the new one, get over here. I'll have me a look-see at Lord Cornwallis's seal. I begin to wind around the soldiers, and I am aware that both guards watch me with eyes full of scorn. When I reach them, I say nothing, only hold out the paper. The round one takes it, and they both study the paper. Something about the way they examine the seal makes me believe that neither of them can read. I force myself to make no insulting remark about their ignorance. Instead, I say, may I go now? Reckon you can run along now, sonny, says the round one. He returns my paper, and then with an ugly laugh he adds, hope you reach your journey's end before the pox overtakes you. What? I look at him with wonder. Why do you say such a thing? The other slaps at his knee with mirth. That rebel him, what you was talking to? Reckon he has the pox. Lots of them does. Yeah, that's right, sonny. The round one points to his own scarred face. That's why the likes of me and Johnson here gets the job of guarding these poor beggars. We done had the pox. The horror I feel must be evident on my face because their laughter grows stronger. It follows me across the crowded floor and out the door. Captain Harkins leans against the porch rail as he waits. I am ashamed because the sight of him makes me feel better. Inwardly scolding myself for finding comfort in the presence of the enemy, I scowl when he smiles at me. How is your father? He asks, and we begin to walk down the sandy street. My father is well. I straighten my shoulders and head, pulling myself up tall and trying to quiet my pounding heart. My father is strong, and he is not defeated. I do not glance at the captain, who is my enemy, and we move through what was once the familiar village of Camden in silence. When we are near Kershaw House, I see the lines of soldiers in the side yard, and I see the gallows. The hangings are about to begin once more. I stop as if suddenly frozen. I will not hide my face this time. The captain takes my arm and leads me toward the front steps. Upstairs with you now, he says, and he opens the door. Inside, I press against the wall, listening. The thuds, familiar from the morning, begin. Men are dying. I draw in a breath and step back through the door. There are no redcoats on the porch. I go to the railing and leaning over, I can see into the side garden. 4 guards are there, muskets and bayonets pointing at the soldiers who, eyes down, wait. Last in line is a young man. He is tall and his thin face is partially covered by a straggly beginnings of a beard. They should have left him shaved before his execution, I think. The guard who's at the last in line is one whose face I recognize from the earlier encounter, one who Captain Harkins ordered to leave me be. I know what must be done. With my hands clenched into a fist, I move toward the gallows. Halt! The redcoat shouts. Halt I do, but I fold my arms and speak gruffly. Leave me alone, I say, in what I hope is a determined voice. I have Captain Harkin's permission to be here and Lord Cornwallis's own seal. I flash the paper in his direction. The soldier hesitates. I consider reminding him of the captain's threat, but I think better of it. I only want to speak to the men, I say. The guard shrugs his shoulders, and I go quickly to the young soldier. Rob Wilson, I say, do you know him? With manacled hands, he pointed in front of him. Third one up, he says in a voice that's already dead. You'd better hurry. Before I can move, though, he speaks again. This time there is life in his voice. Are you a friend? He asks. I nod. My mother, he says in a rush. Sarah Jenkins is her name. Lives over by Sanders Creek. I'm James. Will you get word to her, please? His voice almost breaks, but he swallows and goes on. She'll hate it powerful bad, but still, she ought to know. Don't you reckon? With a start, I realize he is waiting for an answer from me. Yes, she ought to know. You'll see to it then? Yes, Sarah Jenkins by Sanders Creek. Bless you. God bless you. Before I turn, I see a smile come to his lips. Running, I call, Rob Wilson? Yes, says the third man from Jenkins, and he pauses to turn toward me. Suddenly the guard is beside him, bayonet thrust forward. Move on, he shouts. The prisoner walks, and I trot to get beside him. I've word from your father, I tell him. He worries for you. My father, he repeats. The two words come slowly as if he tastes them well before letting go. He turns his head so that I get one glimpse of his face. His eyes are blue, like those of his father, but clear and untroubled by sickness. Tell him I died well. Tell him I did not beg. Yes, I say, and I stop walking as he moves forward. He turns back for another glance. Is he wounded? No. Without deciding to do so, I lie. Your father is well. Good, he says, and now he is at the steps of the gallows. I want to turn away. I have managed to block out the sight of the other men and the sounds of their deaths, and I do not want to watch Rob Wilson die. My feet start to move, but I force them to stay. As he climbs the steps, I suck in my breath and hold it. Just before he reaches the top step, I'm forced to breathe again. I whisper a little prayer, but I do not bow my head or close my eyes. I will watch Rob Wilson die, and I will not be sick to my stomach. I am different from the boy who vomited this morning. Now I too am a soldier. I will not cry. I will not be sick. I will wait and I will watch. The chance will come for me to strike back for Rob Wilson and the other men who die among the blooms in my side yard. Even when it is over for Rob, I stay until James Jenkins too has stepped to his death. Now there is something I can tell my own father. I can tell him that these sons of Carolina did not die alone. I do not stay to watch the men carried to the long ditch in front of the house. Inside me there's a great sadness and a great anger. I whirl away from the gallows and tromp back toward the front of the house. One of the guards steps out toward me as if to speak. I glare into his eyes, but I do not slow my pace. He says nothing, and I stomp around him. The porch is no longer empty. 3 redcoats lounge on the steps playing cards. Unaffected by the burials, they laugh and talk together. I've got me eye on 1 or 2 of them pretty Camden maidens, a fat soldier says. The major ordered us to leave them be. His small companion stretches and yawns. Leave them be? Huh! You just watch how I leave them be. All 3 of them laugh. There is space enough between the 2 smaller men for me to get up the steps. I duck my head and charge in that direction. Wait, little fellow, you didn't say the password, the big one says, and he laughs. The smaller one grabs my leg. I kick at him and stumble on the front door. The big one is behind me. I throw myself at the stairs, but the soldier's hand reaches out and grabs me. Leave my brother alone. It is Mary's voice. I know that she stands halfway up the stairs, but I do not look at her. I turn to face the redcoat. You rebel brat. He reaches out and grabs my collar. I spit at him, and his heavy hand flies to slap me, leaving the left side of my cheek burning. Watkins! Captain Harkins shouts. He too is on the stairs. The soldier lets go of me, and I run. Up the steps I go, and without slowing down, I try to pass Captain Harkins. Joey, he says. I want to ignore him and push around him, but there is no railing. Reaching out, he locks his hand over my shoulder. I'm sorry, those men will go and report. I do not struggle with him. Instead, I turn to meet his gaze. Joey is a nickname used for friends, I say coldly. Please call me Joseph.